So hi everyone. I guess we have a limited time for these meetings, and so I think we'll just start the meeting now, and people can join, enter the meeting, and as they come in. So first off, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's talk, and Marina for providing the interesting talk that's going to be happening shortly, and all the people that are joining from all around, hopefully the world, but mostly from Canada, it looks like. And I just have a few things to say. Lisa mentioned that this meeting is being recorded, so this one, make sure everyone knows about that. And what we're going to do, first off, Lisa Dare is the host for the meeting. And then how we're going to plan this meeting to run it is everyone's going to be on mute during the presentation, and then people can enter questions in the chat box feature during the presentation. And at the end, depends on the time, with the chat box questions, we'll have a Q&A at the very end. And then Marina, we can do live questions from everyone in the audience. And so I guess that's about all I have to say about that. And so I just want to introduce Marina to get things going here. So Marina Fischer is a numismatic specialist at the Nickel Arts Gallery at the University of Calgary. She holds an MA in ancient history with a specialization in art history from the University of Calgary. And her research focuses on ancient Greek and Roman coins. She oversees the university's vast money collection of 23,000 objects spanning from the beginning of coinage in the 17th century to BCE to the modern period. She is a recipient of the 2018 University of Calgary Teaching Award and shares her passion for teaching through her lectures and continuing education courses. And we're really pleased as a host club to have the Calgary Numismatic Society having a member presenting at the conference, and Marina has taken over the role as head for the kids program we have called Carnivores. So we're really excited to have that going, and I want to thank her again for that. And I guess one last thing, we're having our coin show in September, so everyone's welcome to come to that. So I guess I'll pass it over to Marina now, and everyone sit back and enjoy the presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you, James, so much. And thank you, everybody, so much for taking your time and joining this talk. I do not think that many people know about the collection we have here in Calgary. It's at the University of Calgary, and it is absolutely incredible. So hopefully when we host another convention in the future, I will be able to do another tour and exhibitions and other things that we are already planning and thinking about. But as you see on my slide here, I have Nickel Galleries as the title. And in the program, it says Nickel Arts Museum. And I just want to point that can be sometimes a little bit confusing because we essentially have both names. The original name was Nickel Arts Museum, but now we mostly go under Nickel Galleries. I have no say in any of that, but I do want to just clarify that that's exactly the same place. So what I want to do here today is talk about coins, and especially here in this case, ancient coins, from a little bit different perspective. I want to look at the coins outside of history, outside of economics, outside of many different ways how we approach coinage. And I want to look at it I want to basically try to see how the people in the ancient times experienced these coins and how we also perceive them today. So basically from those two angles. And this is what I organized for today that I want to share with you. So first I want to talk about art from the beginning, especially art of coinage, how right from the beginning, we see that very strong connection between coins and art. And that's what I want to just elaborate a little bit more about that particular connection. I want to then point a few different minting techniques that were developed. They're quite artistic. And then looking at the human figure. Obviously, when we talk about ancient Greek and Roman art, human figure has always been central. Study of human anatomy is always associated with ancient Greek culture. And obviously, it is connected with coinage as well. Then we go into signatures and artists and signatures just to the modern day, how all that works. A little bit on portraiture. It's impossible not to talk about jewelry and ornamentation, how coins were used in that fashion as well. And I will close with just a few slides. I want to show you how nowadays we also do exactly the same thing. So that's the plan. So art from the beginning. I came across this quote is in one of the articles by Giovanni Giardini, who is a scholar in Greece, and he wrote an article for a conference that has been published, and I have that information later on. And in it, he says, since the onset of their circulation, coins have been demonetized, relieved from their purely economic function, and were transformed into art and ornamentation. So this is really interesting to think of it that way as well, that from the very beginning, we know, we have the evidence for that coins have been demonetized. So what does that actually mean? How can we explore this further? What is the evidence? What can we learn about this today? And I want to open up with this photograph. It's from the exhibition from the museum in Israel, in Jerusalem. They did an incredible exhibition on electrum coinage. It was called White Gold. And just this year, they published an incredible volume. It's also called White Gold. And the moment I saw this photograph of this early ancient Greek Oriental coinage, Lydian coinage, it struck me as so beautiful that these coins are so raw and so organic, and there's something so pleasing to touch and to the eye about these ancient coins. So I wanted to go back at the very beginning and look at these coins and what does that actually mean. Anybody who knows about beginning of ancient coinage is familiar with the so-called electrum lions. So these are the coins they're generally named as the very first coins in the world. We start seeing them in the middle of the 7th century BCE in Lydia. And by the way, in my introduction, we do have the beginning of the collection from the 7th century BC, not 17th. We do not go to the Bronze Age. There was no coinage back then. But we go into the 7th century BC with the very beginning of these lion coins or lion trites, 1/3 of the stater. And as you can see in the images, they are quite beautiful. And the images of the lions are not accidental. We can trace them to art, and I will show you that. Here as well, I have the back of the coin because the back of the coins do not have any images on them on the reverse until much later, about end of the 6th century BC. I absolutely love this slide that I found on Coin Talk. Somebody posted these photographs and they're incredible because I want to demonstrate to you what we are actually dealing with. When I show you this coin, and it's really hard to get the feel of what the coin is, how it looks like. But when you look at this and what it actually represents, it's not a tray, it's 1 cent, with pretty much the same size as what our Canadian cent used to be. So we can see the size of all of these early coins that were minted in Lydia and Ionia, which is modern day Western Turkey. We can see the coins are absolutely tiny. We also know that they paid great attention to how these coins were produced. Their weight is absolutely precise. And this is something that still puzzles us. And many scholars are trying to understand how they were produced, why were they produced that way, what did it actually mean? And also deliberate mixing of gold and silver, which is electrum, is the metal that was used to produce these coins. So why was that all done? We don't have answers for this yet. But what we do know is what we can see, and that is how tiny these coins are. And what you can see in the slide here, this is the lion coin that I showed you in the previous slide. So this is that 1/3 of the stater or the trite that we see of the lion. So a little bit more about that connection. So why lions? There have been a lot of interesting artistic evidence that came out from that region. It is older than the coins that we have, the lion coins that we have. And I have just included here a few examples from the different cultures and different civilizations that lived in the same area of that Western modern day Turkey. So the Hittites, the Phrygians were the cultures that were there, mixing with the Lydians later on, and then the Persians take over the territories. But we can see right away, and that we can say that for all of the Near East, is that lions were extremely important symbol in Near East. It goes way back, like thousands of years ago. And we see them being killed. We see the high reliefs. We see sculptures of lions. We see miniature sculptures in ivory, like the one in the central image here in the slide. And we have the clear connection between the coins that we have and the images of the lions in Near Eastern art. There is one very confusing element in our coins here, and that is this so-called knob. So I don't know if any of you have seen these coins, if maybe collect the coins or read about these coins, but this is often called a knob, which is such a such a crazy word to describe something like this, or a sunburst or something like that. And we have no clue what that actually represents. What is happening on these lions' heads and all of these coins, we do not know, because we do not have similar uh, depictions in art. But here we have this sunburst or knob on the coins. But that roaring lion, the open mouth, the teeth, and all of that is clearly connected with art. Also, we know that the minting workshop that was discovered in Lydia by American archaeologists relatively recently, a few decades ago, we know that they discovered this minting workshop right next to the temple of a goddess, Cybele, whose entrance was flanked by the lions, very similar lions as the ones depicted in this slide here. So there's this really interesting connection with lions and royalty and coinage. When we go further down the timeline, we see the coinage spreading from Near East to Greece. So first it goes to the Greek colonies in Asia Minor. So essentially that coastal area of modern day Turkey. And then it spreads to the islands and to the mainland Greek places. The very first style of Greek art that applies to sculpture and painting and vases and metalwork or anything else is called the archaic style. And here you can see the dates for that archaic style. So around 600 to 480 BCE. These are the dates for the very first official Greek style that applies to the coinage. And we can see the style of the coinage clearly connected with the art that was produced in ancient Greece at that time. So here I have an example on the left of goddess Athena on the Athenian archaic coins, and we can see here Athenian warrior on a grave stele or grave marker right here with the same Attic helmet as we call it, and the profile, and this eye that I will talk more about. It's called the almond eye. And here as well, we see in Ionia the profile of a warrior or a hoplite connected. I have an example here from Lydia of a soldier. But what we can clearly identify in all of the types of art that was produced at the time is that so-called stiffness and rigidity in depiction of the images, especially figures, human figures. And we know that that is influenced by the ancient Egyptian art. Archaic art in Greece is heavily influenced by what was developing in ancient Egypt, and I will talk more about that soon. The next style is called the classical style, and the dates are here from 480 to 323 BCE. So the period ends with the death of Alexander the Great. So that's the date for that 323. And we can see the similar thing with the sculpture that I have examples here for and the coins. We do not have a lot of other art. We have lots of paintings and vases, However, all of the other art, especially when it comes to wall paintings or any type of paintings, had disappeared due to the humidity and fragile climate in Greece, all the way from the ancient period to the modern. It's just too humid and everything disappeared, deteriorated, and it's gone. So we do not have any paintings. But this is why the sculpture and vases made out of clay, fired clay, were really important. And we can see that connection on the coinage as well. Then the last period here that is relevant to ancient Greece is called the Hellenistic period. And it starts from the death of Alexander the Great to death of Cleopatra, which is the year 30 BCE. And here as well, when we compare the busts of these rulers that I've included in the slides and the coinage, we can see clear connection between the sculptures and the portraiture on the coinage. We often work back and forth between the busts that we have and the portraits on the coinage to identify the figures, to try to understand the style. A lot has been done when it comes to ancient sculpture and ancient coinage during this period because of this incredible detail that was applied to depiction of human figures and the portraiture. We will talk more about that as well. So this is just the introduction, so you can see the different styles and different periods that appear during the Greek civilization and the Greek art. The last thing that I want to point out here is how the coins were minted. And we can see that the objects and the spaces and the figures that were included in the coinage is carefully thought out. It's not something that was randomly done. It's not something that was just stamped or hammered into these tiny pieces of metal. It was done deliberately with a lot of planning and incredible skill. So especially when it comes to use of space, we can see that, for example, in the obverse on the left, we have the charioteer who is hunching right here, is slightly bent to fit into the curve of the coin. We have the flying Nike right here, whose wings, or the personification of victory, whose wings are perfectly fitted into the dotted space. And that dotted border is used as the barrier of the space where the image should be contained. You can almost think of it as a frame for a painting or for a picture. And most beautifully are here the horse's front legs, how they're beautifully depicted and fitted into that space as well. And we can see with the wheel as well and many other elements. When we look at the reverse or the back of the coin, we can see similar technique was applied and similar attention. The fish that is a border here, it has the curved belly, and the same we can see on the other side. And the legend or the inscription is also curved. And then other elements here, this little crayfish and so on. So I think this is really important to establish right away that the way the coins were produced in the ancient time was carefully thought out and it had meaning. So let's look at some of the other minting techniques that were applied in the ancient world that were clearly connected with artistic styles and other media in art. So I will start with these archaic coins from the Greek island of Aegina, right, very close to ancient city or modern city of Athens. Famous turtles, also quite tiny. But what we can see right here in this incredible photo is that they are truly miniature sculptures. The relief, what we call this high relief of the turtle and its shell, is almost like coming out of these tiny pieces of metal, or we can almost imagine this tiny turtle being placed on the flat metal surface. So right there, these are actually sculptural elements of coins. They're not necessarily just pieces of metal with only with the function of transactions, daily transactions or larger transactions. That's not obviously the only thing that is happening here. Generally, all archaic coins are quite high relief. Not all of them are as high as these Egina ones, but many of them are quite high relief. And I will show you the ones from Athens as well. But first, before I go into talking about the Athenian coins, I want to tell you a little bit more about this really interesting minting technique that was unique for Asia Minor. This is an example from the island of Lesbos, and another area uh, that was quite famous for this intaglio technique is southern Italy, or the Greek cities in southern Italy. So what intaglio is, sorry, I have this bar that doesn't want to go away. Let me see if I can move it. Okay, sorry, I can see better now. So intaglio is an engraved or incised figure in stone or other hard material depressed below the surface so that the impression from the design yields an image in relief, or the negative form of the image as we call it. So you can see on the obverse, the head of the ram is in the normal convex shape. So it's like that high relief of the coin, but on the back of the coin, or the reverse of the coin, this is actually impressed into the metal. It's really hard to photograph these coins. Any of you who may be dealing with photography and trying to photograph your collection, you probably already experience how hard it is to photograph coins. But I wanted to show you this image of an ancient seal that was carved out of hard gemstone. This is Etruscan from the 6th century BC, and hopefully you can get a better idea what the technique of intaglio is. So it's like carving into the material, deep into the material. So when it's pressed, in this particular case, these gemstones or seals were used to seal the documents or to authorize transactions by pressing them into the soft clay. And then we would essentially get exactly what we get right here in the high relief coins. But here that technique is applied on the coins, and it's quite hard to execute, especially press into the metal. And here is the example from at the Pontum from southern Italy, one of the quite beautiful and irreplaceable coins that have ever been produced. These barley ear that is raised or high relief on the obverse, and then intaglio technique on the reverse. They are perfectly aligned. So the axis is exactly right. So when you turn the coin like one way and you calculate the barley ear, and then you turn it the other way, they're perfectly aligned. Also, the dots and everything is there. Some scholars speculate that these coins were not minted in the same technique as the previous ones that I've shown you, like for example, the turtle with being struck by the hammer and the die, but that they were actually, the metal was placed into the molds that kind of closed and then they were hit. That would be the only way to explain such incredible precision with which these coins were produced. As you can hear, producing these coins was quite time consuming. Incredible skill went into producing these issues, and we only see them for about 30 years or so, and they disappear. The last thing that I want to point out when it comes to special techniques of minting is this incredible coin that was just recently at the auction. I forgot was it Heritage Auction? I don't know if any of you have seen it. I was so excited to see that coin resurface because I only ever found one single image of this coin, is what you see here. But it had showed up at the auction just a few months ago, and it sold for around 15,000-20,000, I believe. I wish, we could have gotten it or placed it somewhere where we could actually study it and see it in real life. But here we are with a photograph. If any of you have ever seen any other coin like this, please let me know, because I would really like to learn more about this particular technique. But as I said, so far, this is the only example that we have. It's also from Lesbos. It's electrum, so mix of gold and silver. And this is the reverse or the back of the coin. The obverse of the coin is this Athena that I have right here, helmeted Athena. And then we have these two female faces overlapping each other so that we can have one figure here. So here's the headdress, here's the hair, like the braid on the back, and here's the face that goes this way, and then identical figure with a face this way, and then they're overlapping, and we can see this beautiful optical illusion result. So simple but effective form of optical illusion, same female portrait on both the left and to the right. So how was this technique executed? Did they have two separate dies? Did they struck one after another, or was the die carved in this particular way? It's really interesting, and we do need to see the coin in order to answer these questions. So design is deliberately intended to confound the eye and engage the viewer's attention in attempting to resolve both portraits independently, thus presenting the viewer with a visual paradox. So again, what that means is that this coin was meant to challenge. It was meant to amuse. It was meant to represent some experience for the holder and whoever possessed this coin or whoever used this coin. So again, there is a lot of effort, deliberate effort and skill and time and investment that went into creating these coins. Why do we not have more? It's a really interesting question. It's possible that they are in private collection like this one now. It was just recorded because it passed the hands through the auction. But it is very likely that we do have other coins like that, and hopefully they will resurface in the future. The human figure, as I mentioned, is really important when it comes to ancient art, especially ancient Greece. Ancient Greeks were the first ones to really study and understand human anatomy. It wasn't just a physical experience of the human body, but they saw the human body in both physical realm and divine realm. The way the human body functions and the way the human body is created, how we are born and how our body grows and how our muscles develop and how our proportions are established, is something that the Greeks had early on established, that works on the system that is beyond just our body. It actually connects to the cosmos. It connects to our universe. The same proportions, the same ratios in human body apply to the plants, to the animals, to many other things on this planet and outside of this planet. And this is why the human body was extremely important to the ancient Greeks, because they saw it as a portal to understanding the divine. They believed that if they could understand the human body, they can understand the gods. They can understand the divine purpose. They can understand the universe and beyond. The appearance of human figure on the coinage starts pretty much from the beginning, but the only thing that we see on coins are profiles or the busts, the faces. That's what we see. This is the archaic Athenian coin. So some of the earliest depictions of goddess Athena on these coins, so you can see it's 490 BC, just beginning of the 5th century BC. Soon afterwards, even about 50 years later, we see a very similar style that is still connected to the archaic elements in the sculpture. So we see it right here in the archaic coin, so that almond die that I mentioned. And then we continue to see it in the so-called classical style that was already developing in ancient Greece, and it was well established in the sculpture. The style of the helmet changes. There are other elements that are there, the olive leaves, the olive leaves right here, and then we have this floral design. We have the crest is a little bit different. The face profile is more sophisticated, especially when it comes to depiction of the flesh. You can see here the beautiful smile and curving of her cheek that is definitely missing from the earlier style. So we can see that the craft and the skills are progressing, and they are definitely matching what is happening in other arts in ancient Greece. However, some elements that do not necessarily make sense, like this frontal eye on a profile, remain. So why was that so? And there's a lot that has been talked about the Athenian coins. They're really well known. They're really well studied because we have a lot of them. We're really fortunate to do have a lot of these coins to survive. And here I just wanted to show you a little bit different angles so that we can all experience how these coins were produced and how high relief they are. So this so-called almond eye, and we call it almond eye because of the shape of the eye, is an important element or key element in the archaic style, in earlier style, that is a clear connection to the ancient Egyptian art. And I've included here one of the Egyptian female profiles from the wall engraving from the tomb, 14th century BC, and we can see that typical Egyptian eye, or the profile, the frontal eye on a profile image. And that is exactly what the Greeks borrowed and included in their sculptures. So that's what we see. I have a couple examples here from the archaic sculptures, and we can see that almond eye here as well. So from the archaic period into the classical. We also have something called archaic smile, which is this little bit seen here in Egypt, but it is essentially quite a Greek invention, where we have the stretching of the lips without parting. So no teeth are visible, but we do have the movement into the corner of the lips, into that folding of the skin and creation of these little marks right here. And we see that exact thing on the classical Athenian coins, so that archaic smile. Again, clear connection between the coins and the sculpture. When we move on later into later centuries, so this is the 4th century with the so-called traditional style of Athenian coins, we see that the eye finally starts to follow the sculptural styles, or a more realistic depiction of human figure. So we have the profile eye on the profile face, and clearly influenced by the development in other arts, specifically sculptured. As I said, this is primarily what we have, but it is similar to what we see on ancient Greek pots as well. So Athenian coins becomes more human in response to changing attitudes towards representation of human form in Greek art. So many of these things that I already touched on, that the importance of representation of human body, the idealization of human body, because of that inevitable connection that was seen by the Greeks between the human realm and the divine realm. When we continue looking at a depiction of human figure, human anatomy, the idealized bodies in Greek art and coinage, we do see, as we would expect, incredible minting of coins with these figural art on them. So here is one of my absolute favorite examples from the beginning of the 5th century BC, also from Asia Minor, from Kyzikos. We see this crouching Zeus with the incredible musculature. We see the proportions of the body are exactly as the one we would find in the sculpture. And I'll show you one example that we have from the original bronze sculpture. But here is the typical Greek male body, the typical Greek male anatomy that is widely recognizable to the modern day. And here is the example that I wanted to show you, Artemisian Zeus or Poseidon. We're still not quite clear exactly who it is. Many believe that it's actually Zeus, that he held originally a thunderbolt, which is this really interesting device, how the Greeks imagined the thunder that could have been held in the hand, because if there was a trident, which was associated with Poseidon as the god of sea, it would have blocked the view to the face. So either or, it doesn't really matter, because Zeus and Poseidon pretty much looked exactly the same. This example can be connected to the images on the coins. So when we have depictions of male figures on the coins, we see that same attitude and the same details applied to the figures on the coinage. So here I have an example of Zeus, first right here on the left from Alexander's coin. And here we have Poseidon identified by his trident on the right. So the same proportions of the body, all of this was studied to great extent and published by artist and philosopher Polyclitus, who published a tome called the Canon or the proportions of the human body. Unfortunately lost, but we do have other evidence that survives. And I just want to show you, like, my colleagues at the museum, we had this giant coin. It's quite big, like actually it's quite this big, and of this particular coin. And we made a clock for my office, and I was like, I need to make the business out of it. So if anybody wants to create like coin making business, like, or sorry, the clocks that are made out of images of coins, please let me know, because I really think there's a huge market for this. But anyhow, this is my beautiful clock that is made out of this incredible image of the coin. Here, another incredible example that I wanted to show you, the back of the human body that clearly resembles and it's connected very closely to the ancient Greek sculpture. As a side note, ancient Greek sculpture is usually known to us through Roman copies that are made in marble. Pretty much 90% of ancient Greek sculpture was made out of bronze. This was their material of choice. However, when the Romans came over and took over the Greek territories, they melted all of bronze to produce weapons, because obviously that's what the Romans were all about. It was all about war. However, they knew that the art that the Greeks produced was too important to be destroyed. And they made numerous copies of many of these Greek originals to preserve this incredible human creation. The bronzes are extremely rare, and mostly they come to us from shipwrecks. So this is how we know that these bronzes are original, because they're come out of the sea. Many others, especially today, there are a lot of forgeries by so-called Spanish master and so on. So if you ever see an ancient Greek bronze, quite doubt it unless the provenance is really well recorded, and especially coming from a shipwreck. When it comes to female figures, we see the similar attitude to female figures as we see in other art forms. And that is, the male body is nude, while the female body is fully clothed until the middle of the 4th century BCE. When the female body is depicted, there's great emphasis on drapery, or the clothing and the folds in the clothing. So this is what the artists use to demonstrate, to showcase their skill. And we see these foldings are incredibly beautiful, especially when we consider they're done out of stone. And here we can see how it lays on the body. This particular dress is called peplos, and we can see the same type of dress. It's a typical female clothing that we see depicted on coins. And another really interesting thing is that when we do come to the first depictions of full female figure, we see goddess Nike, or goddess of victory. She is usually identifiable by the wings that she has, as you can see in this particular coin from Olympia. And we can see that peplos with that like shirt on top of drapery right here, and we can even see the folding in the coin, and beautifully imitated or mimicked by the wings. A few more examples as well. Again, mostly Nike, that's what we see. So the earlier ones are on the left. So again, an example from Olympia. And then I have a little bit later example from Brutium from southern Italy. Again, depiction of Nike and the emphasis on the clothing. As we move more towards the end of the 4th century, going into the 3rd century BC, we start to see this so-called wet drapery effect that was very popular in sculpture, started in the Athenian Parthenon by sculptor Phidias. It's called this wet drapery, where the female figures are still dressed, but you can see the outlines of their bodies through the clothing. Really very, very popular. The very first nude female figures that we start to see on the coinage are again Nikes. And these are the example that I was able to find where we see this half-dressed female bodies, which will become really popular later on. And it is influenced directly by the very first female nude sculpture that was done by Praxiteles around 530 BC. So before I move on to that, I just wanted to show you. And here's Nike in both instances depicted hammering a nail into a trophy. And trophy was essentially the ancient version of a voodoo doll of the enemy. So they would have this wooden post and they would drape it with the enemy armor, and then basically whatever was done to that post represented that what would be experienced, essentially what they believe would be experienced by their enemy. So again, just like the voodoo doll, it's quite interesting. But here is the Nike doing that. The next, or the only other female figure that is ever depicted nude is Aphrodite, or later on Roman equivalent of goddess Venus. And it starts with that very first female figure, so-called Aphrodite of Cnidos, done by Praxiteles. The original is gone. We only have the Roman copies. And here on the left, you can see the beautifully executed coin from Asia Minor, from Cilicia, from Tarsus, 370 BC. And here I wanted to show you on the right, it's a Roman coin, but it depicts that particular famous Aphrodite of Cnidos. That was depicted in coins, and in this way as well confirms to us how the original actually looked like. So that's another aspect of ancient coins, that we have famous art that no longer exists depicted on coins, and then we can study it through the coins. Signatures are really interesting. Signatures in general is not something that existed or was associated with artists, and definitely not extensively until the 15th century Italy, during the Renaissance. This is really the beginning of the Renaissance, the beginning of the fame of the artists who used to be seen only as craftsmen. However, we do have some signatures in ancient Greek period. These are from the pots, famous potter and pot painter Ezekias, and we can see the signature on the pot, which is right here and right here. And here it says Ezekias made me. And then we also see some signatures of sculptors on the basis of the sculptures. So most of the, we do have lots of bases of the sculptures. The sculpture not always survives. It destroys throughout history. As we can see, this one, just the foot remains. But we do have this incredible inscription that tells us that who made it and why they made it and when they made it and that kind of stuff. When it comes to coins, we generally do not have any signatures on coins, except during a very short period or brief period in southern Italy, specifically in Sicily. And in Sicily, the city of Syracuse. So all signatures appear around 413, 400, 9 artists approximately, and they're even then quite rare. As you can see, every 5 to 10,000 dies that were cut, we have one that is actually signed. Really famous artist, Kimon, with his K that you can see here on the slide that is identified. These coins are highly valued, quite rare, very beautiful to collect and to have. This is another one that is highly regarded by Eunatos, the artist Eunatos, and this is the depiction of the nymph Aretusa. So we know only of 8 that exist. However, what is really important to me, even more than these coins that were produced, is this really unique drinking cup. It's called the kylex, that has the impression, and that is the important part, it's the impression of the coin in the center at the bottom, which is called a tondo, of this late 5th century BC coin that is actually impressed. So the coin itself was impressed into the clay, or actually, sorry, I should say the coin itself was covered in plaster to create that negative intaglio, and then that intaglio form, and then that intaglio form was pressed into the wet clay to form that image. But what is particularly interesting is that this is not just somebody who copied the image of the Nympha Retusa onto the pot. As I mentioned, this is the actual impression of the coin, because we can see that irregular shape of the ancient coins that is here. And I tried to find one of the closest ones. I don't know if anybody actually tried to really identify the coin that was used to make this, but nonetheless, this is extremely important that we see that how the ancient Greeks and the Italians perceive these coins. They were that important that they wanted to make impressions of them, not just imitate them. Another important thing when it comes to art and coinage that is often talked about is the Hellenistic portraiture on coinage. So starting with Alexander the Great, and then all of the Alexander's successors and other Hellenistic kings later on. And the coin on the left is the coin that was either minted by Alexander or just around Alexander's time, which depicts the hero Heracles or Hercules. However, even though the image of Hercules was very popular in ancient Greek coins, he has the lion skin draped over his head, or the lion's skull right here. So we have the eye sockets, we have the jaw with the tooth, we have the ear, the lion mane, the paws are tied around the neck. So this is a typical image of Heracles. However, when we do look at the face of this Heracles, we can clearly see that this is an individual portrait, and we can identify features of Alexander that appear over and over and over again on coinage. We have a famous mosaic on the wall in Pompeii. We have some other sculptural elements, the busts and so on. So we know that this is the image Alexander, the deep set eyes, the protruding chin, furrowed brow, and so on. This is a little bit later one. I think this is by Lysimachus, one of his generals later on in Syria, but we can see that the same features of Alexander over and over and over again. And that is what starts this incredible revolution in portraiture. Prior to that, placing a portrait of a living person on a coin was considered a great sin. It was only reserved for the gods, and it was believed to be a representation of great pride and hubris. They would bring evil onto the person and so on. And this is why even when Alexander adopted the image of Heracles into his own and transformed that profile of Heracles into his own, he did it with great care. And at first it was really ambiguous. Like the Heracles started to look more and more like Alexander, but it was not really until about 326 BC in Babylon, when he was there, that he openly depicted himself as on his coins, that was openly his portrait, and he also depicted himself with the ram's horn as indicating his divine status. But here I wanted to show you that comparison. This is one of our coins, and I really love how it beautifully connects with the portrait of Alexander from Alexander's sarcophagus from the late 4th century that is currently in Istanbul, wearing the lion skin on his head, and we can see all of those features, the same lips, the same eyes, the same nose on the coins. From that point on, portraiture of the living rulers and their families explodes. However, it is a slow explosion. The first ones to do it are the rulers in Egypt. So Ptolemy I, one of the closest friends in general of Alexander's, takes over the territories of Egypt. And a couple decades later, it took him a little bit of courage to do it. Alexander died in 323. In 305 BC, Ptolemy I starts placing his own image on the coin. This is actually a coin of his son, Ptolemy II, who depicts himself and his sister and wife, Berenike, and sorry, RCNA. And on the other side, he depicts his parents, his father, Ptolemy I, and his mother, Berenike I. So right here, we have that dynastic continuity representation of rulers. And the way that these rulers were depicted, with this also protruding chin, the deep eye sockets, and so on, became the identifying element of the Ptolemaic or Egyptian rulers, all the way down to Cleopatra, who pretty much looks exactly the same. So 300 years of continuity of the same portraits that establish and emphasize that continuity and the reign of the Greeks in Egypt. The different portrait types, they were developed. So we see the profile type right from the beginning. We've seen it in Greece with early depictions of Athena and other gods. Here is Arsinoe II, the deceased queen of Egypt, dearly loved, depicted on coinage for centuries after her death. So here, and also Hellenistic coins are the first coins that depict the real historic women on coinage. And here, a continuation what I mentioned of these incredible realistic portraits of Hellenistic kings and rulers all the way to the end of the 1st century BCE. We have then also so-called Juget portraits, where we have two portraits overlaying each other. So one and the other one on top here, you've already seen this one. And the Romans obviously take it even further by aligning three figures together. Frontal portraits, those were quite rare in the ancient world. They appear in Rhodos. They appear in Syracuse. The famous signed coinage also depict the god Nympha Aretusa in the very famous coin. I think it was one of the most expensive coins, Greek coins that were ever sold. I think it went for almost 3 million Canadian in 2004, I believe. They're not very common, but they do appear, and they're quite exquisite. The three-quarter frontal portrait. So here's another image of Aretusa, or another, sorry, it's Lymph Larissa, inspired by Syracusan Aretusa. And then we also get to later portraiture. It's still a profile, but it has something which we call heavenward gaze. This is Constantine, who takes this portrait to a totally next level. It becomes a typical image of a Christian Roman emperor. But we do see it with Alexander, especially after his death. I want to show you these ones. So after his death, his gaze is lifted upward, indicating his divine status, or that he's now God in the sky, in heavens. And that is what Constantine adopts and plays on. The last thing I want to talk about are the jewelry and ornamentation, because I've already mentioned that demonetization of ancient coins. And here is the reference or citation for this really beautiful article, quite short, unfortunately. We definitely need a lot more study on this, but coins as ornaments and jewels in ancient Greece. This is image from the article, because it's extremely hard to find any of these things. You really kind of need to dig deep through the exhibition catalogs, auction catalogs, and so on to find any of these coins, specifically when it comes to Greek coins. By the time we get to the Roman coins, we have a lot of surviving coins that were placed in jewelry or used as jewelry and ornamentation. However, by the time by the time the Greeks end and the Romans come, a lot of these coins are melted, reused, and we do not have a lot of Greek coins that have markings of being used as jewelry. So these are some of the really rare ones that have either the holes or attached loops to be placed into the bracelets or necklaces, or used as earrings, and so on. So here is one of the example from the 4th century BCE that's currently in the British Museum. That's essentially how this was added so that it could be worn on a necklace. And I do have a Roman example, later Roman example, how these coins were used. They could either be just like this. Greeks tended to be much more simple. Romans, as with everything else, was quite elaborate. There was a lot of pom-pom and fair when it comes to anything Roman. And they would place these coins into this quite beautifully executed and elaborate pendants and necklaces and so on. So the coins were used for rings, bracelets, necklaces as pendants, pins, belts, amulets, even military setting. They would be placed into helmets. They would be placed into the breastplates. They would be placed into the belts and so on. And also vessels, as I've shown you the Greek example, the only one that I'm aware of, and I will show you another one from the Roman world. What is interesting is that they use the bronze coins, the silver coins, and the gold coins. So they use all of the precious metals. They're often, especially the gold ones, tend to be in the setting, but it's not limited only to the precious metals. They use everything. This is a painting or a portrait from Egypt, Roman Egypt, that was placed onto the sarcophagus where the woman was buried. So instead of like masks, like Tutankhamun's mask, we tend to see these portraits. They were painted of the deceased and then attached to the sarcophagus. And so here is, and they're extremely valuable to us because we get a lot of information from these incredible portraits. And here in this case, this woman is wearing this really thick gold necklace with a pendant and a gold coin in it. There are a few other ones, but as I mentioned, the Greek ones, the evidence is really thin. So when I come across anything like that, and again, I'm absolutely excited to hear from any of you that may be able to share something that you come across from the Greek examples. So this is that Metapontum barley ear that I showed you, used as on a bracelet, 4 of them on a sorry, it's a necklace, my apologies, a necklace, and also this pin, which is called a fibula, which was used to clamp the clothing or the cloaks or the drapery of men and women. And we can see it attached right here. So we definitely do have evidence that ancient Greek coins, and obviously Roman coins later on much more, were used as jewelry and ornamentation. So demonetization of ancient coins was absolutely complete and certain. I wanted to show you the Roman example here, which is really interesting because the coins are set. So this is just not imitation or impression. They're actual coins that were placed into this necklace. And the most interesting part is that the quality of the coins or the condition of the coins that was used for the jewelry did not necessarily have to be exquisite. It did not have to be untouched. It did not have to be a high quality coin. They would include even worn off coins, smoothed coins, as you can see, like this particular one. I think it's Vespasian, where we can see the coins are not in a perfect shape, and they would still use these coins for jewelry and ornamentation. And at the very end, I want to show you that this practice has not died out. We do these things with ancient coins. We take ancient coins, an imitation of ancient coins, place them into jewelry, and we do the same thing with modern currencies. There is so much out there that incorporates ancient and modern currencies. So this is one I just found and I wanted to show you. There are lots of bracelets and necklaces and jewelry and all kinds of stuff that you can find that incorporate coins. Paper money as well. We see this is a famous necklace by Scott Campbell, one of the exhibitions where he actually cut out pieces of the American bills and created a necklace out of it. Or Sophie Kemp, who creates rings out of the world paper money. And Ted Stanke, one of my absolute favorite artists who done some incredible things with coins. He cut up these coins, and this is just yeah, these are the playing cards. I believe he created a deck of playing cards, but he had a lot. You can look it up online. He has some images on his blog and website. Our Elizabeth turned into Princess Leia, Cinderella, many others. And another Canadian artist, Micah Adams, who laser cuts Canadian coins and other world coins and creates all kinds of stuff with it. This Elizabeth one is my favorite. This is where I want to end. It's actually perfect timing. So I hope that you have enjoyed this talk. I would also love to hear what any of you have to say, share, comment, ask. So thank you very much. And I will bring it back to James or Lisa.
Thank you, Marina. So I think I saw lots of really great comments just in terms of some of the things that you shared. I know there's some very stunning photos there. We are going to run a little bit late, so I will have time for a couple of questions. So Marina, one of the questions that came up was a question of why is the portrait side referred to as the reverse?
That's a very good question. I know many of you numismatists know these things, but sometimes it's really important to kind of go back to the basics. And we generally call the main side of the coin obverse or head, and the back side of the coin is the reverse or tail. The reverse is called this way because one side is the main side. And usually that main side or the head was actually the die for it was placed in the anvil. And that would be the main impression would be, so this is the anvil, the obverse die or the main image is placed in the anvil, and then the coin was placed on it and then it was struck. Later, so the first coins only had that main side or the obverse. There was nothing on the back, just the in-cue squares or the punch marks, as we call them. Later on, the top die that was used to strike the coin from the top started to include an image as well. And that is called the reverse. However, we can clear, like in the ancient coins, not in the modern ones, but in the ancient coins, we can actually clearly identify which side is what. And I'm gonna see if I can open this and show you that. You see how this side is rounded? And then this one kind of, well, this is the one without the back, it doesn't have the back image, but the obverse or the main side tends to be more rounded, and the back side tends to, oh, I have some really good ones on the back side. Give me 1 second. I need to close the chat. The back side tends to have the impression, oh, this would be a good one. So you see how the main side is just perfectly flat, and the back side has the impression of the punch mark, and it usually curves. So if you actually hold a coin in your hand, you will be able to see how the coin sort of curves, and I always forget the convex or concave. I think the concave is the side that kind of goes in and curves this way. So we can see that here as well in this Athenian example, how the impression of the reverse die goes, and the top is like beautiful and full. So I hope that answers the question. Let me see where.
And the other, and I know there's so many. It's been you're such a wealth of knowledge, Marina. So I'll do one more question. I'm sorry that we can't get to everyone's question just because we have another session coming up. But there was a question of the coin that had the optical illusion, and I think that's one that really fascinates a lot of people. But there was a question of whether that was an error or an accident. How did that optical illusion coin come to be, Marina?
Well, as I mentioned, we don't have a lot of information because it hasn't really been studied, because it's not available to public. It's in private collection. We don't even know now where it went. But based on experience, and once you see like million coins, you kind of really get a feel for it. That particular coin is definitely deliberate, because even if you try to create something like that nowadays with our modern tools, and even if you try to do anything like that with paper and different media, it's actually really hard. And the way that it's aligned, it's absolutely perfectly aligned, tells us that a lot of work went into that. And it is definitely not deliberate. We can conclude that pretty much with 100% certainty. It's not deliberate. The alignment of the heads are exact. They're just this effect, as you can see, they cross in a perfect spot, exactly where they should be crossing. Look at the eye. The eye is done in a way that is perfectly aligned to create one single almond eye. This is not an accident. This is something that has been very skillfully executed.
All right, so I'm going to pass it over to James just for a couple of closing comments. And once again, Marina, thank you so much for sharing your passion and your knowledge about ancient coins and art.
Thank you all.
And I'd like to thank you, Marina, for a beautiful presentation, really interesting. And I think you got people were just like really, every slide, they were really watching everything and listening to everything you said. It was really great. I'm just sorry that we're sort of running out of time, because I already talked to Cliff, the next speaker, and I said we would be logging in about 10 after. And so so this is the first of 4 speakers that we have. We have one more today starting right away in about 20 minutes. And then we have 2 tomorrow at the same times. So I'd just like to thank Marina again, and hope that everyone logs on to the next meeting. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This is my email.
Thank you.
Everybody is absolutely welcome to contact me. I'm always happy to connect. So
Yes.
thank you all so much. Thank you.
You.
Mhm.